Yo guys, this is Infinite Flash here, and today we're going to talk about the game between Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, and the world's number 2 player, Fabiano Caruana. This is probably the most anticipated matchup we've had in a couple of months, and I have recorded many videos lately, but I wanted to cover this one because this is such a high-profile matchup. And without much else to say, let's see what happened. What happened in this game that was played in the Gashimov Memorial. I think it's the third round right now. And at this moment, we have Carlsen at 1.5, and I think Caruana is at just 1. So I think they're all playing for a win at this moment, and no reason to anticipate a draw in this game. Um, in this game, we have Carlsen playing a Dutch. He played this against a non in the Grenke Baden-Baden Classic tournament. I covered that a couple months back, and we kind of get the same line in this game with the same stonewall kind of setup. Very, very solid for black. Queen e7 to prevent bishop a3 right here. Um, so it's really, really normal stuff. b6 this time. Um, Sometimes black just castles there and plays bishop d7, bishop e8, and bishop h5. That's also another idea. So after knight e5, bishop d7, very normal, protecting that c6 pawn. Knight bd2, very normal. Queen and castles. Oh, by the way, I should mention there's always this idea of queen c1 and bishop a3. But usually against queen c1, knight bd7 happens, and if bishop a3, I think that bishop takes a3, queen takes a3, c5 is okay for black. So knight d2, moves up castles. Yeah, rook c1. And here's the parting of the ways where black really has to make a commitment in the center. He can play c5 here. That's pretty normal. Knight bd7 is not so ideal. And normally this is the right way of approaching things, but I think white would just take here, and black is unable to capture here with the e-pawn because of the c6 pawn hanging here. So after this, then maybe c takes d, and even this position isn't so terrible, but for black, but white has a really strong move with knight dc4, and you're not able to take this knight because the bishop takes b7, and you're about to take this dark squared bishop, which is the holy grail piece, most important piece that black has in this position to make it stable. So notice that bishop b8 or something is running to bishop a3, and black gets destroyed. So the whole position is really strategically just bad for black if he does that. So Carlsen in this game decides to play a5, pretty much just an advance like we saw versus a non to play against a4 and open up the a file, possibly make room for this knight, make sense of that without the a pawn and being impeded by that knight on a6. So he's going to play knight a6 with the a pawn in front of it. And as you see, e3 by Caruana, very, very comfortable. Knight b1, he wants to reroute this knight probably to c3. It doesn't do much here on the f3 square if it goes there. Sometimes they go f3 though, and I suspect that sometimes they also drop this knight back here and go knight f e5. That's pretty normal stuff, but I don't think black has too many problems in that kind of position. So we saw knight b1 instead. Excuse the arrows, guys. And now certainly Carlsen could have gone for very normal operations with c5 or rook f c8, rook a c8, and maybe rook t8, that kind of stuff. But you know, in this position, Carlsen chooses a pretty, I don't want to say radical solution, but an interesting way of approaching things. It's certainly not the usual way of playing the Stonewall. He actually just takes this knight and closes the position slightly. Usually you want to keep this bishop on the board. This bishop's awesome. But he does it for really concrete reasons here. So after takes, the pawn has to go here. This bishop is shut out here. The pawn is just pretty much a brick wall this bishop's hitting against, and after knight e4, the normal retreating move. This is a very nice position, since I think that one of black's ideas is just to probably just take c5 and maybe bishop d5 to fortify the central squares around here. Looks pretty solid to me as a from the black side, in my opinion. So white in this position played queen e2. There are pretty much other moves that white can consider. Bishop a3 doesn't really work because of knight b4, and then it's not really clear what you're really doing in this kind of position. And I think black might be just threatening to take in c5, bishop d5, that kind of idea as we have seen before. So, I mean, it's not really an ideal setup, and you don't really want to take as white because, in fact, you don't even have to take with the c pawn in this instance. You can take with d pawn, and this pawn is really, really weak on d5 square, so you don't want to do that. So we saw queen e2. F3 also looks reasonable to me, but I'm sure that after knight c5 or maybe knight g5, maybe dropping the knight back to the f7 square, black really has a fine position here. That doesn't look like too bad of a position to me. So we saw queen e2 and a4 by Carlsen. I think this is a pretty fine move. Just trying to open up the a file and maybe play a knight c5 if in case of white capturing here. White's pawn structure is really bad there, so you don't want to do that. And now knight c3. Yeah, I mean, he can also consider bishop a3, but I think just black would play c5, and as we've seen before, I mean, this is a very strong and solid position for black, so, black doesn't really have any problems here, and we might consider taking both pawns here and then playing bishop d5 to get a really, really just fine and solid position here. I don't think black has any problems at all. So in this position, we saw Caruana play knight c3, and now Carlsen takes once and plays queen b4. I mean, this isn't the only move. Knight b4 and knight c5 are pretty much the alternatives that you can consider. I don't think either of them is bad. Queen b4 just does another thing by attacking the b3 pawn, and it's kind of awkward to defend, so Caruana finds pretty much the only move to defend it after taking on e4. He can play queen c2 first, I think, but although that hangs c4 a little bit, I'm not sure about that actually, but okay, fine. He takes on e4, plays queen c2. It's all fine here. We've got a very, very solid position here. I think I like black slightly, but it's no big deal. The reason why you'd like black is both of the bishops are pretty bad, but the b3 pawn is pretty weak, and the knight is more active, I would say, than this bishop on g2 at the moment. So that's why I would prefer black slightly. But after knight c5, bishop c3, this takes, rook b1, knight c5 takes. This is really just an equal position, and after knight a4, attacking this rook, I mean, black didn't really, this bishop wasn't really that good, and he has to trade it off anyway, so he gets rid of it for the bishops are, I mean, both bad bishops come off the board, and this position is pretty much equal for a little bit here. Rook at b8. White really doesn't have a choice but to take, and it's pretty much a drawish position at the moment. Rook a1, rook d8. Sure, I mean, white has some weak pawns, black has some weak pawns, and it's debatable whose minor piece is better. This knight is a little bit trapped on this side. I'm a little bit nervous about its position here. So certainly white has some activity here with this rook coming down, maybe even to the 6th rank to attack this pawn here. So I don't think it's that bad for either side. Bishop f1, c5, very, very solid move to keep this pawn in a light square, good strategic move. And now rook a3. Okay. Yeah, I mean, certainly rook a5 was possible, and after this, I just don't really see a way to avoid, this kind of position from happening with rook d2, rook takes c5, knight d1, and threatening the pawn on f2. Let's check here, check again here. I mean, this is if black really wants to push for it. Rook e7, and this kind of forcing line where, I wonder if king g5 is possible. King g5 might be possible as well, but king f7, rook d6, rook c2. And we have a pretty nice position here with the knight, but it's probably not ending in anything special here. Maybe the knight retreats to g4, tries to take on e3 and get some counterplay against the c pawn and the bishop here and the king. So, I mean, it's pretty much a fine position, even though white has a lot of passed pawns here. I'm sure that black can play king f8 if he wants to just draw the game. I'm pretty sure about that one. Anyways, it's all fine for black in any case. Maybe I think this is what maybe white should have done. It's an active way for both sides to play. But the problem with what happens in the game is that after rook a3, Caruana makes life a little bit difficult for him for himself because after knight b1, with this annoying threat of knight d2, knight f3 happening and taking the e5 pawn, white has to pretty much react to that, and he's just not in this case because of rook a1. I don't think this is a good move at all. What he should do probably is just rook a6 and attacking this pawn right over here, and probably after this we would see king f7, rook a7, and this kind of position happening on the board where I don't really think white has too many problems, or no, black should have too many problems. Looks kind of strange to me. I don't think it's too bad, really. Okay. But in any case, I think he should probably take that more active route. He plays rook a1, and the problem with this move is that there's knight d2, and knight f3 comes, taking that pawn, and now we can see why the rook on this a6 square was much better, and more well equipped to meet this because of rook takes e6 being threatened there. Here, Caruana really should play the king to the g2 square, and after knight f3 threatening this pawn on e5, I think rook a6 would happen. The king probably has to defend that. Rook here, here, rook e7, attacking the pawn on e6. This rook gets really active, but okay, white takes with check, and the king approaches for a little bit, but I mean, it's pretty much just a draw in any case. There's going to be this kind of perpetual check happening in either case. I think white really has no chance to avoid this perpetual check, and if white overpresses with somehow playing with this pawn, there's always these mating threat ideas that black has. So rook d6, knight e1, king g1, I think black would just get this perpetual check and be satisfied, but this is probably what white should do. After knight d2, Caruana plays a pretty uninspiring move in my opinion with bishop e2. It's simply just not a good move actually, and the problem is he's just getting a passive position. I think he's much worse after this, and the idea is that you're playing knight f3 to threaten the e5 pawn. Takes is forced, and this rook can never really enter black's position because of rook d1 mate, so Caruana really has to free himself with h3, and Carlsen's just playing really just bone crushing move with h5 here, preventing g4, the g4 break in conjunction with the king coming to the square. Caruana tries that anyway, not h4, excuse me. Caruana tries g4 anyway, but I don't know what he should do. You can't really wait around because of rook b1 with rook b1 because I think black just enters the position, and I don't know, king f1 trying to go king e1 is not really helping things probably. King f7, and black can definitely improve his position much easier with moves like that. And the c4 pawn is falling in this kind of line, and then I mean it's just a terrible position for for white, and I mean you can't really retreat with the. What about rook e7 actually? I'm a little bit fascinated about that one. Probably rook here. And if rook takes, then here. Probably that's the line. Here. That kind of stuff just wins for black. It's a pass pawn, and this pawn structure is just terrible for white. I mean, if king d2, I don't know, you just kind of get the same idea with taking on e5, and white's just lost in my opinion. I'm not really convinced by the entire structure. It's just not a good position, and Caruana tries to play in the most active way. Instead of rook b1, he plays g4. Probably a good move. But the problem is that Carlsen just takes, and has this, instead of just taking the pawn here, which is not a good move by the way, which would allow king h2, and you're not really getting active because of, well, that would drop the rook, but rook d2, white would have this king g3 option, defending the pawn, always keeping pressure here, and I mean it's not really clear what black is doing here. In fact, I don't think white is really in trouble anymore. So you got to play a little bit more cautiously, probably with h4, given that now this g3 square is taken away by this pawn right over here. So black is having trouble. I mean, white is having trouble activating his king right here. Yeah, and here probably Caruana played king h2, but I mean this is running into really just a brick wall here. Probably he should play g5 at some point. I'm wondering about here. I'm not sure about that. It's really tough to play. g5 here maybe, but I don't know. I don't see a problem with this move at the moment. King h2 seems like the normal way of approaching things, and Magnus Carlsen just played rook d2. Probably what Caruana should do is not play king h3 like he did in the game. Maybe he should play g5 and allow this capture right here, in this kind of position to arise. I don't really see a problem with this kind of position. It's much worse for white, but it's better than the game, of course, with this kind of position probably just being much better for black. Maybe rook g2 with king coming here is a good idea. Not sure about the entire concept, but in any case, this kind of position looks really just good for black, I think. Very active stuff here, so it's probably not good for white. It's just a bad position in general. But still, this is a bit more active. I mean, after king h3, I think this is just a flat loss. So the idea is that black just defends the pawn on h4, and this is just a monstrous setup here, and it's very difficult to activate this rook because there's always this silly idea with this kind of checkmate happening. Very embarrassing to have that happen, and f2 is hanging, and there's no active way to play this position. Caruana play d4, but I mean after rook d4, this pawn doesn't defend the square anymore, and this pawn drops. Both pawns drop. Everything drops for white, and this kind of continuation is just not playable for white. Notice that if you give rook a7, then I think king g6 would happen here. And if you give rook a6 to attack the pawn, then black can just give up on the pawn here on a6 because of this mate right here. Taking on e6, of course, I think this would happen. Or king g7, I mean it doesn't really make a difference. But king h2, rook f1, this f2 pawn falls, and black has a huge advantage. Probably a win. Easily a win, I mean. If he doesn't take the pawn, if he plays like king h2, probably rook f1, and the f2 pawn falls maybe. The only way to defend it would be rook a2, but I wonder, maybe rook e1, rook e2 is pretty much sealing the deal. And we probably get the same idea with a position like that. King g1 maybe? But black just takes, and this kind of position is really just terrible because all the pawns fall and white only has one passer while black has like 4 or 5, 3 or 4. So going back, see if I can find the notation here. There we go, rook a3, and after this move, rook takes c4 happened. Yeah, that's not a bad move. Just Carlsen's just mopping up those pawns. King e7, excuse that, guys. Rook e3, very normal, just defending the pawn, the only way to defend the pawn, really. Rook d4, yeah, Carlsen's just going to push this c3 pawn here and hope to promote his pawns. It's just a terrible position for Fabiano. And yeah, it's pretty much a technical mop-up job here. c2 pawn is coming. Check here, yeah. Just not much white can do. He can only prevent the passer from going, but now f3 falls, and yeah, in time trouble, I guess Caruana. For the last, he's been time trouble since like move 2035 or something, where, I mean, he had this bad position with this position. Probably, I think he was in time trouble around where he blunders here. He was probably in time trouble here. That kind of explains why he blundered, but if we're going to go back to this position is not good, and, well, I mean, f4 is just a blunder since he gives this check and then takes the pawn. and if he takes c2, the idea is that g4 falls, e4 and e5 are weak, and the king can approach that black wins easily. So that's we can call it a day there, I think, and Caruana did for sure. So Carlsen beat Anand with the Dutch Stonewall, very strangely, and now he beats Caruana from the Stonewall as well. But it's not because of the opening that Carlsen won. I mean, Caruana blundered and didn't play the most active continuation, and didn't it didn't end well for him because Carlsen found a few good endgame moves there, especially that h5 move. That one thing to remember about this game, Carlsen just finds those moves to keep the game alive. h5 is just very, very strong here. This pawn in f3 is just super strong. I mean, just taking away the square, it's just terrible for white. So I think this is very, very strong endgame play by Carlsen. You definitely want pawns in a configuration like that near the king because these are considered like attacking pieces. So just very, very nice stuff here. Yeah, and g4 is pretty much desperation. I don't really see anything else for white down. It's pretty miserable. Rook invasion is just too strong, pretty much. Well, anyways, guys, that's a pretty devastating. I don't want to say devastating, but a pretty heartbreaking loss, given that Caruana really didn't do anything wrong to like move 33 or something. But I mean, stuff happens, and I mean, he had a bad day. So, but you can't blame him for losing to Carlsen, of course. Carlsen just is one of those players that just don't die and doesn't die. I mean, and just one of the toughest players in the world to beat. Anand found out that on the first round day when he was up a clear pawn versus Carlsen, but really Carlsen had grinded it out and defended like a madman versus Anand. So another good demonstration of why Carlsen is really just a great endgame player. So h5, very strong move. Alright guys, I'm gonna sign out here. So see you around, and just drop a like or a comment or whatever. Appreciate any kind of constructive criticism that you guys can offer. Appreciate all the support that you guys give, of course. See you around.